Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know that you're a super busy dude. We've been talking about this for a long time as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time away from all your daily stuff and
Totally,
doing
dude.
this.
I feel like
It's like 5 p.m. your time, right?
Yeah, it's late. It's 5:10. Or not late, but I mean, it's 9 over there or 8?
Oh, no, it's 11.
Oh, it's 11. Oh, yes, because you're Central Time or
East Coast.
East Coast Time?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking it's like 2. I'm like, I always mess it up. I'm like never knowing like when the US is at what time. But yeah, man, I'm happy because like I feel like for the longest time it was just like, hey, dude, we doing the podcast? I'm like, definitely. And then it like 6 months would go by.
Well, and then you were like, well, I'm moving to the Netherlands. Let's do it after that. You got to get settled, and I totally get it. So
totally for months like before the move, I was just like figuring out my life and like what that was going to look like and everything. And now I feel like is the perfect time because it's like, I don't know, I'm at like the most peace since you've DM'd me.
So what's brought you peace? Like, what does that mean to you?
And I don't want to like rant about like hating on New York City or anything, but I think being in New York City for so long, I was like just in the 24/7 hustle bustle, and I extracted what I needed from that after years of being in it, and it was amazing. But I think towards the tail end, before I moved this past August, I was just drained and done with that hustle and bustle, and now I have peace because I walk outside and there's not cars and crazy people. And
did you know that about yourself when you were there? Like you get there and you're like, something about this is just maybe.
I knew like getting the job with Gary and like moving to the city, like I knew like the city wasn't always going to be for me, but it was an amazing thing to like learn and be in the city, get the street smarts, obviously be around VaynerMedia, Gary, all that was just like priceless. But I knew long term it was like either I was going to like find love for it or I was just going to find my way out. And I never found like the love for it. I think I found peace, and I was living in Sunnyside, Queens, which is more like out of the city, had like its own form of peace, but it was still Queens. But yeah, I just knew like long term I wasn't going to be there. And
when did you know? Like when did you first know that like, you know what? It might be time to be thinking about a transition here.
It was COVID for sure. Because it's like I joined Team GaryVee in 2018 and 2 years flew by. It was just like nonstop. Those 2 years feel like a lifetime. And then when COVID happened, I got like my life back in a way. I was remote editing. I was not working as long hours or in the city. I was like back home on Long Island, New York. And then from that point on, then I like COVID started dissipating. So then I moved back to the city. So I was in Queens, but it was still a COVID world where it was like, you were not really going in and all this stuff. And, through that, me and my partner were like, we don't want to be in New York. Because during COVID, we did like a big road trip for like 2 months. We went to Wyoming and Colorado and all these amazing places. And like, I'm a really like nature lover. Like I love just exploring new places and stuff. And so it's like, we got to do that while also like being on Team Gary, like, and so I had best of both worlds with COVID. And so it was like, I don't want to give that up. And I think that's what like led to the, like, let's move away from New York City. And I don't think for a while we didn't know it would be the Netherlands. Yeah. But, it was just like COVID gave me my life back. And it was like, we want to sustain this life. We don't want to go back to the 16-hour grind days. Cause like, it's just not needed.
Yeah, it's wild how many people would love to be in your shoes to have had that experience working for somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk and, just such a pioneer, but in that clarity that you got, that even though I'm here doing somebody's dream job, it's not your dream job. And totally. And that you would have that confidence to leave something like that,
And that was super hard. And I still think about it even to like today. It's like I'll always miss like being around Gary in that 24/7 setting, vlogging him. It was, I'm very aware, it's like a very unique thing to get to do, especially pre-COVID. It was just a different world. I think like the way the team exists now, I think it's a little less intense. Pre-COVID, it was me and a few other guys, and we just lived and breathed the GaryVee world. And it's like I couldn't have extracted that amount of like entrepreneurial things, and then, video skills. Like it felt like I used to call it boarding school.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was like I was in this, in the office all the time, and I was like, living in the city for the first time. So in a way, it felt like I went away to school or something, and it was just immense amounts of learning. And I didn't even know it at the time. Like when I joined, I thought I was like the best. I was like, not that I deserved to be there, but I just thought I knew shit. And then like just from that point on, I realized like I don't know nothing. And every day since like joining, and every year I've just learned so much in different aspects, from like social media to more production stuff to just, I don't even know. And now like Web3 is like a whole thing that like has been like the past 18 months of my life, where it's like that I've been learning there. But yeah, like I don't know, like it's hard to have left it, but I'm so grateful to like, I've just extracted, taken what I needed. I built a relationship with Gary that like I'm so proud of. And like, and now that I'm in the Netherlands and I can still have that relationship. Like that's the most important thing for me, is like, I didn't want to lose the momentum and the things I built, but I obviously knew like, I'm not going to see him that much anymore, and or the team for that matter. And so that was something I had to get over,
Yeah. So when you say that the team is evolved and maybe it's not as intense anymore, can you maybe draw a little more clear of an image of what that looks like now versus what it was?
Yeah. So I can obviously talk about the past more than I can now, just because I'm not there. But the past was, I joined, I got very lucky. Like, they only had 2 videographers at the time. And so when I had this like lucky break, there was this clip that went live on Gary's YouTube. And I had met a few of the people in the room from that clip. And basically Gary was like, I want to hire this kid, Jason. And like, I got very lucky, and somebody sent me that clip because they knew who I was, pieced it together and was like, I think you're the Jason. And, I got brought on at a perfect time because they needed videographers. And I had already been vlogging. I'd been working for a gentleman named Ed Turney, who was a big fan of Gary. And he showed me Gary in like 2015. And he was like, I want to do everything he does, obviously at a smaller scale. And that was my like actual start in videography. So I was like, so that sort of like paved the way. And so when I joined the team, I knew exactly how to make the Daily V, and and I obviously evolved and learned. But
I was going to say, I listened to a previous podcast that you've done, and you were talking about this, and I went and I looked at the paparazzi, like episode number 1, the first one that you did. It's funny to see the similarities in the style of how you shot that and put it together in something like a Daily V.
Totally. And I'd love to like share those vlogs again. I always think about like resharing them, and they're old. They're some of my first vlogs that I'm very proud of. Like working with those paparazzi guys was like, besides the whole Gary Vee universe that I've been part of, like the Positive Paps was their series. Yeah. That was like some of the funnest weeks of my life, because it was like the first time I was really going to New York City. I was like 22, and like I was learning so much about the city, and then just with these 2 guys who like were really genuine and nice, but in this like taboo industry. And I got to make this vlog for them, and it was way more interesting than the stuff I had been shooting before that, which was mostly like entrepreneurial vlogs, but very just like pretty boring, like tactical stuff, like day in the life of a business owner. But this was the day in the life of 2 paparazzi guys in New York City, and they were like the best at it. And so doing that was part of like a little digital media agency we were building at that time. Mm-hmm. And, little did I know, 6 months later, I'd get hired by Gary, and that sort of like, fell apart, obviously, because I went full time with Gary. But those projects with the Paps and a few other clients helped me be able to, make it on Team Gary. Because on day one, they were like, hey, man, you're lucky to be here, basically. And your first assignment is 2 Daily V's this week. And there was basically an understanding of like, if you don't make good Daily V's, like you're out, because you're useless at this point. Yeah. And you got lucky that Gary wants you on here. Now it's your time to like prove that. And I went in under like, I knew that was the case, and like I had a playlist built out, like because that's the hardest thing as a video editor, right? Is like you're looking for music for hours. Yeah. And so I knew on my first day, like I spent hours looking for music that I was already going to put on footage that I didn't even know existed yet.
Yeah.
And that helped me out a ton, because as soon as I got into like day one, I was just like, I had the music and I just started finding the moments and building out this vlog. And, I remember like, day two, when I sent in like my first draft, like the team was just like, oh shit. And I was very proud of that moment, because it was like I knew I was going to make it, but I knew I had a lot of work from that point on to go.
But how in the world do you go from somebody that didn't have anything, then was it your aunt bought you a GoPro?
Yeah.
Right? She buys you a GoPro, you're vlogging just on your own, having some fun. And then you decide that you're going to start helping somebody locally with gym stuff and then entrepreneurial type stuff. And then now you're on one of the most sought after kind of teams that videographers kind of look up to. So how do you go? And first of all, I think we have to call attention to just how badass that environment is, that you could go from basically not doing it before to a position like that in no time, if you have the chops to do it,
Totally.
And so where did you draw inspiration from to be able to go from 0 to 100?
Yeah, I think I'll speed through it a little bit, but it was, I innately just I was doing some hiking in like 2014, 15. I was road biking a lot, and I was strapping my phone and making these like edits on Movie Maker.
And why'd you decide to start that, by the way?
I don't know.
Okay. Not to go off, but
Yeah, no. I had done video editing before that. Like straight out of high school, my first year, freshman year, I was undeclared major. I had no camera, no video skills, no want to be a videographer. But I'm sitting there hours each night and I'm editing this. I called it Goons in the Making, because me and all my friends were the goons. And I made this like 10-minute film from every photo that I had taken and every video. And I asked my friends to send me stuff. And I made this like collage video of everything me and my friends did for like the past 5 years. And it was a cherished video that me and my friends have. And I didn't realize it at the time that like I loved like video editing, but and I didn't make that video and like go on to do other stuff, but it was like I was doing it, and then it was like a long, perfect series of events. It's like I started hiking more, I was road biking, I was posting clips on Instagram. I strapped my phone to my bike like on the handlebars, and I was like recording time lapses. I was innately interested to make clips for the internet. And so then my aunt was like, let me get you a GoPro, because she was just very kind, and like she just wanted to get me something. She was always like, looking at something she can get me. So gets me the GoPro. That allows me to like get into like GoPro Studio or whatever their app was, and I'm making more clips. And then I come home and my dad's watching Casey Neistat. He's just like on his laptop watching these vlogs, and I'm just like,
by the way, you say that your dad, the breadth of people that watch a Casey Neistat vlog are just wild. 11-year-olds all the way to, full-grown adults.
Yeah, to a 57-year-old adult who doesn't even enjoy New York City, and he's just sitting on the couch, just infatuated by Casey's editing style. And I almost like in the beginning of it was like in my head, like making fun of my dad. I'm like, why is he watching this blogger? That's so weird. And then I remember I was in the kitchen, like looking into the living room of him watching it. And then I ended up watching it. I'm like, oh, this guy is dope. And I'm like, and his filmmaking is so like raw and almost easy to make, but he's very good at it. And then I went down that rabbit hole. I loved what he was doing. And then I got a credit card and I bought an 80D, because he was shooting on a Canon 80D. And I was like, fuck yeah. I'm like, I'll get one. Like, I want to do this thing. I didn't want to be a vlogger, but I'm like, I love like the filmmaking side of it. I love just like how he's shooting like New York City and like making stories out of it. Mm-hmm. And then soonly after, Peter McKinnon, like that was like his era. Like he blew up. And so that was more me. I think I was like, oh, I want to be Peter. I want to tell stories that are like, cinematic and beautiful, but obviously not like, shot on like a red Komodo or something. Yeah. So yeah, went from like GoPro to dad's watching Casey Neistat. I buy this camera and then I just start slowly, shooting. And at the time I was in college going for like OT, occupational therapy, and I was working at State Farm as an insurance agent. And I didn't like any of those two things, but I just was in like the societal rut of like school and like got to make money. And then I just kept going, and I shot a few videos, and I made like the best connection in my life, who's like my mentor. He's that guy, Ed. And day one, he was like, do you know who Gary Vee is? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, you need to look him up tonight. And he's like, this is the style of content I want to shoot for my gym. Because at the time it was like, okay, I'll make a few bucks with this guy weekly. Maybe I can make some money with videography. And that was the case. He was paying me $125 a week to make a vlog that I probably spent like 13 hours making each week. So I was making
wow.
But it was like the best decision of my life because like Ed, led me down this rabbit hole and he took me to Gary Vee's like first 4D session, which is his like consulting. Yeah, it's a day session in New York City at VaynerMedia with Gary and like all the people around him.
With all his ads team and everything, right? You get to learn the process and all that. Yeah.
So he brought me, I probably was working for him for like 3 months. And as soon as I walked into that office, I was like, holy fuck. And I already had a huge belief in what Gary, like I was a fan at that point. And I was like, oh my God, I want to work here. And I met D-Rock that day. And I asked him, I was just ballsy. I was like, yo, I'm like, how does one get a job here? And he's like, I'll give you my email. And he's like, that's how. And he's like, send me your stuff. And I sent him my stuff at the time. And, he shot me something back. Basically, I was like, hey, man, like, you got to keep working. Because I had like 4 or 5 good videos under my belt. And so that was like a generous no. And I just kept going from that point on. So it was a big, it was like a true love for videography. Yeah. From a phone to GoPro to Casey to Peter McKinnon style content to then learning about Gary's vlogging at the time. And then ultimately it led me there. Did D-Rock give you any sort of direction, by the way? Or is it just like a no? It was a no, but like keep grinding kid, because I think he knew that like I had it in me. Like he could tell. And I gotcha. Yeah, because we always stayed in touch. It was always like I'd send him an email and maybe I'd get an email back 4 months later or something, because I was always trying. Like Gary put out a video in like 2017 where he was looking for videographers, and I applied to that and I didn't get it. And I was seeking after that. It was the dream, and I didn't think when I landed it in 2018, I thought it would be more like a 2022 thing. Okay. Like I knew I'd get there. I just thought it would take me a lot longer. So what do you think it was about the output that you gave D-Rock the first time, and then the thing that actually pushed you over? Was it a style thing, a storytelling thing? Was it? It was free work. Okay. It was and connections. I while working under Ed, I had met tons of people in the gym world. He owned a kickboxing gym, which was like women's kickboxing. But I met it's actually a huge industry full of like just tons of business owners, and they have their own conferences and stuff. And so I was vlogging Ed, and I was meeting all these people, and I had met enough people, and I had done free work for one of his buddies, and basically that guy, I did free work for him, just a random occurrence, because I was just hungry. I was doing anything I could just to like build my portfolio, and he went to 4Ds, that guy. And by then, the guy that ran 4Ds, like the host of it, was this gentleman, Nick Dio. And the guy who I filmed for, did the free work, went there, was like, hey, I had a D-Rock. His name was Jason, but he ended up going full time with this other gentleman who's my friend. And Nick Dio knew who I was, because I went there with Ed. And he's like, oh yeah, Jason's a killer. He's amazing. That's cool. And that's how it led to Gary being like, I want that kid. I'll steal him. And so to get to Gary, it wasn't really necessarily through D-Rock. Right. I think Gary was like, let's hire that kid. And I'm sure D-Rock was like, oh shit, I know that kid. I think that all helped. But without doing, the willingness to do some free work, I would never be on that team. Yeah. So I guess I'm a big sheer coincidence or whatever, you just ended up in the right positions, right? But only because you kept saying yes to things and getting surrounded by the right people. The right people that were movers and shakers, putting themselves in the right places that then put you in the right place at the same 100%. Time. And I was in the position to do it. I was a young kid, and I still lived at home at the time, and I could do free work. A lot of people, can't, waste a whole day to make no money. Yeah. And I by no means was, rolling in it, but it was like I didn't have that many bills back then, and so I could go shoot at some random CrossFit gym. Yeah. And give this guy a vlog, and that was so invaluable, Yeah. Like if I never did that, he never would have brought up that stream of, consciousness, and then Gary would have never hired me. So it's very interesting. It's like people like rag on like Gary's free work thing because he talks about it a little bit, but it's like the serendipity. You can't
It's wild what happens, right?
It's like, this is a free occurrence, and like, we're going to build a relationship, and it's like, maybe 10 years from now we do something together, and like that would make this conversation like super invaluable. So it's like, I don't know, people are too precious of their time. It's like, I don't know, like what's 8 hours if you're going to live, you know?
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from, because I mean, we see it all the time, and I feel like that's sort of the basis of social media anymore, is like, how can I find the cheat code so I don't have to actually do anything but just get all the rewards as if I did something, you know? How do I make that one 100%. Video on YouTube to be, you know, the Mr. Beast? How do I become people? Yeah. And I don't know anything about art, you know, like what in the world? It's just,
but like, to speak on that, like Beeple, Gary, and how do I become, and Mr. Beast, how do I become that? It's a long amount of years of consistency.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are aware of that, but it's like, are you really aware of that? Gary like did wine content for 5 years, and then he's done 10 years of content with a machine, like a team behind him. And then, you know, people are like, you know, how is VeeFriends so successful? It's like, you know, because he did 15 years of community building. Like, that's insane. Most people don't do that.
Do you think,
like
do you think, man, there's like a million different areas I want to go.
Avenues we can go, I know.
But like, do you think that Gary, because obviously Wine Libraries, TV and everything, that was like very forward thinking at the time. Do you think that what he does right now, if Gary Vaynerchuk wasn't a name, could he start from zero today doing the exact same things and still become the Gary that we know?
Yeah.
Or do you?
I think so.
I'll give you a little context for where the question comes from. Is like, does being early play a major role? Or because you talk about Casey Neistat, well, a godfather of vlogging, basically, right? You got Peter McKinnon and all the things that he was doing in like 2016, 2017 to really start how tutorials and things are being done today. Coffee, Jesus, if I see another coffee B-roll sequence because of him. Like, these are pioneers, people that were pretty early that sort of set trends. So that's where that question comes from, is like, how powerful and impactful is being early versus it doesn't matter if you're early or not, just if you're good, you can actually make it.
I'll ramble a little bit. I think, yes, early on anything is fantastic. If we all started taking Gary's advice in 2020 to make content on TikTok, like, that would have been great, but we didn't, you know? But yes, being early is fantastic. Back to the original stem of the question is, would Gary be successful if he restarted, had nothing, had no money, blah, blah, blah? Yeah, he'd hop on the boat like all of us. He'd be on Instagram making posts. He's very good at like engaging with his community. But the thing is, he's consistent, and he'd be continually consistent, where he would see the next big platform, and that might be the point where he explodes again. Because I think what we all don't realize is, like, he was doing early YouTube, but since he was so consistent in that, he was seeing what the next shift in social media was going to be. And so that's why he was so good at Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter and all these things. So it was like, he was early on one thing, he's so consistent in it, he's in the field, he's seeing like all these new platforms come in, and then he's early to the next one.
Yeah.
And so since like he was so involved with social media, that's why he blew up very early, you know, when TikTok came out, because he already had so much. It's a momentum game, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why if he started again today, he wouldn't probably have as much momentum as he did if he's just restarting right now. But I think on the next launch, on the next big platform, he would just seize that moment, because that like leads, it just compounds. I think that's what he's done really well.
Yeah. He's funny. It's funny to watch him embrace a new platform, because obviously, and I don't know if this is how you guys thought about it internally, but this is how I perceived it, is like, okay, there's this new thing, like TikTok, for example. TikTok comes out and it's a lot of repurposing at first, because, well, we already got this, we got these workflows, we got this content. We know we just need to like put stuff out there and wait for some sort of feedback in the comments, or, you know, whether people are liking it or not. We need to let it sort of mature as a platform a little bit as well, and kind of just like let the community grow so that we can be part of it and learn what do they want, so that we can make specifically for it.
Right.
Yeah. It's just funny though, to watch that evolution, because like I remember seeing the first few posts from him and I was like, yeah, that's totally just like something I would expect to see on Instagram. And then it seemed like overnight there was a magical change of like, oh, this is actually for this platform. So like how much of it's driven by members like yourself on the team? Like how much of that is driven by people that are around him versus him pushing what it should look like, how the storytelling goes, all of that kind of stuff?
It's both. I think I remember like, because TikTok didn't exist when I was, on the team, and then it did. And for a while, because we had such a good system for Instagram and LinkedIn and all this stuff, we had it like to the T, and we were maximized. Like we were just sustaining that. And then these texts start rolling in from Gary saying, we got to go hard on TikTok. And we're like, sir, yes, sir. And then we didn't really do that much. Like we tried a little bit, and then he's like, we really need to go hard on TikTok. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, and we're killing it on Instagram. We're killing it on LinkedIn. We're just like not doing well. And then he was like, I'm going to restructure the team if we don't fucking figure out TikTok. And that was when like we went in.
Well,
and so that was like the good leader. The leader was like, okay, like I'm gonna fucking fire you basically. And I don't know if it would be that extreme, but he was like, I just remember it being like the third time he had said something, and it was like, oh shit, we need to act. And so that's when we broke out into like platforms, and Caleb, who was like my like editor best friend, like he sat next to me, he owned TikTok, and from that point on, his job was just like, how do I maximize and like just do this right, not repurpose. And that's when they started making original content and just like thinking out stuff. Like they would just think out, Caleb and a few people on the team at the time, like right in the dawn of it, they were just, how can we, like what's working on TikTok at the time?
Yeah.
And a lot of it was like funnier stuff, quicker stuff. And so they started going more organic, like what Gary preaches. And so it got way more strategic versus just like taking the Instagram clip
and putting it out there,
making it a 9x16 and like doing it up. And so it was a lot of like Gary telling the team to do something. And then obviously it has evolved from that point on. And now TikTok's like super important on his content, and he blew up.
Yeah. So question about process versus being creative. I mean, at a certain point you have to have certain processes so that you can consistently output things.
Yeah.
But if you over process, it can kill creativity. So I'm curious, how does the team balance something like that so that you have the quantity, the sheer quantity that he wants to put out on each one of these platforms? But then how do you also stay creative so that it doesn't become, here comes this templated thing that they keep putting out? You know what I mean?
I feel like it's like a refinement of that, content structure. So it's like, at least at the time, and I'm sure it's pretty similar these days, it's a good logging system. When they're filming Gary, Dustin, who's like the main videographer right now, and all of us at the time, like had to get very good at filming the moment and logging that. And so the biggest hack, it's very simple, and D-Rock's like the creator of it, is like we would just take an Instagram story of our viewfinder, and we would see the timestamp, and you could write, on that picture, like, empathy for, small business owners or something. I don't know. And so,
so you get content, but you also get to go back through the story and have these like,
totally
titles, right?
Yeah. So, and basically you would just save those. And then at the end of the day, maybe I'd email them to myself or like to whoever was going to like take the footage and then digest it. And so we got really good at logging stuff. And so that allowed for more volume, because it's like, you take 16 hours of footage, you know that there was like these 6 hot moments, you'd load that into Asana, a ticket would be built out. And then like all the footage lived on Google Drive. And so from that point on, like that was something new. And like we didn't have that structure. Like the original, like when I joined, it was whoever filmed would then the next day go back to their computer, and the videographer would subjectively choose what I thought was great. And I didn't have like timestamps. I would just be like, oh yeah, like during the talk, that was like an amazing moment. But that's like very subjective and stuff. And over time, it became like way more strategic. And so, so it's like from the timestamp to digesting it. Now it's on Asana, and then we're like building from there. And then even from there, it's like you post a long form piece of content, and now like the team started extracting like data points, spikes in the engagement on YouTube, and being like, that's a clip, that's a clip, that's a clip,
Yeah.
of like whenever like, you know, the audience was watching it more. And so it was like stuff like that where, you know, we didn't have to do a lot of the thinking. It was like the customer had already kind of told us. And that allowed, I think, us to deliver on volume, and then we could be creative on the side. You know, it's like, okay, we know what clips we can give Gary. We'll keep him happy. And now I can go maybe make a mashup film about, you know, building the biggest building.
You know, I'm glad you just said the mashup because that's one of the things that I struggle with sometimes is like we'll go out with some of the people that we do personal branding with. And, you know, after a certain point, you end up with just terabytes of content and a repeat of so many of the topics. And it's fun to do something creative to be able to sort of sequence different looks together from different talks, different places, right? Yeah. But like when you start getting so much volume at the same time, it's like, I don't remember, did they say that over here? Did they say that at this place? So I'm curious, how do you structure and organize that so that you can go back in time and sort of remember like, oh, he talked about empathy here, he talked about empathy here, you know? Yeah.
I mean, the glorious thing, and listen, I think 99% of people won't have this if they're working as a content creator, but Gary has a search engine.
Right.
You know, anyone can go on it and you can type in empathy and it's going to pull up every time he said it. That lives on YouTube. It's faulty where it doesn't pull up stuff that might be in like the server full of like all the raw footage.
Yeah.
But Gary has so much content where it's pulling up stuff. So if I was making a film for Gary today, a lot of my time would be spent on that search engine, just searching stuff. And so obviously he has the luxury of like this beautiful like system that can just trace his word. And that's how they build a lot of their films. I think for anyone that's like doing content like you guys, where it's like multiple entrepreneurs and you're filming their stuff, I think you got to get really good at logging moments, or maybe taking the transcripts and then like putting those somewhere. And that way it's a searchable database. I can remember working for the gentleman, Ed, who I mentioned with the kickboxing gym. I was doing content for the gym, but then he also had his vlog, and I was copying the same thing as him. I was doing the vlog, but then he also had to have his own sort of films where I would take one stream of consciousness, like he would it would be like one theme. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it was a lot on me. It was like, I just had to remember like when he talked about that stuff. And that's hard. Yeah. It's like, if you have, terabytes of footage, it's hard to do that. So it's like, my advice to that, younger Jason that was doing this stuff, I should have been logging on Asana of the time.
Yeah.
And putting those hot moments in. So I think there's got to be a system where it's like you are logging the hotter moments that you might make a film over, a mashup, or something of, or it's just lost in the sea of content.
Yeah. It's something important that I think should get called out, and something that you said was that D-Rock was taking Instagram stories to basically use that as his log. And I just think of that so many business owners, before they start doing something, they need a pretty looking organization kind of thing, right? Like they need the systems to be pretty looking. We need everything to be great. And it's like, no, you really need the speed. And you're right. I mean,
it's like, the thing with that is like, it's not pretty. And that was like just the nature of the beast. Cause it's like, as a videographer for Gary, it was like, we're filming, but you're also doing like a ton of other stuff. Like maybe you're like rolling his bag through the airport while you're filming. Mm-hmm. And then he says something amazing. You're like, let me take a photo of that. And so I think a lot of it was just like, what's the easiest way to do this? And because we didn't have the luxury of like, taking the clip and then like running it to the computer and like pumping into Asana. Like that was like the afterthought. So it was like, I think the pure like volume of it led to these ideas of like, what's the quickest way to just log these moments? And so, I think a lot of business owners and like entrepreneurs, like they're very precious of things and they don't want to, do it the dirty way, but like Gary does it. And now like, that's like a tried and true thing. Like, I don't know.
So you've been on one of the most sophisticated content teams. If somebody was going to get started today and they don't have that, but they aspire maybe down the road to be able to create content at that kind of scale, what's your advice for getting started? To the entrepreneur, not to the videographer, but to the entrepreneur.
To the entrepreneur. To just get started, like if they maybe had made a little content or.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's step number one: go find a local kid at the college with a camera, and whatever your business is. Maybe you can do a trade service or something.
I think,
is it do it yourself with a phone? Like, I don't know.
I think both. I think the first thing that comes to mind is maybe you're good at shooting yourself. Most entrepreneurs, I think, need someone. I think they need a young kid that's in college that's a videographer that can help them out. I think that alleviates a lot of the stress that my buddy, mentor Ed, he's like an amazing speaker, but he's horrible at tech, and like he can't shoot and film and edit. Like it would never get done. And we got like, luckily, like our pairing was perfect. Like I was a young, hungry videographer kid, and he was this good speaker guy, and like it was a perfect matchup. So I think the first step, maybe it's find someone that can help you shoot and edit. But I also think like it just triggered a Gary Vee thing, and he's always talking about like the first thing you could do is maybe become like the mayor of your town, and instead of talking about all these broad things, like maybe you just go to like your local deli and like shout them out and be like, yo, this is like the best place in town, and here's why, and like just developing yourself as like the local entity. I think that allows, like, because you're very familiar with those things, instead of like talking about stuff that you might not be, and like you're trying to be Gary but you're not Gary.
Right.
He just talked about wine, and that kept going until he realized, like, let me do business content. Maybe you're better at talking about your local area. So I think it's like, I think like my initial advice would be find a kid that's hungry, and you'll have someone to help you make content. And then I think you should go a little more niche and like maybe be the mayor of your town instead of, trying to be Alex Hormozy and like making this like profound content. That's only for the 1% of people that are, can, talk about that sort of tips and tricks like he can. Like his style of like speech is just so concise,
Okay, so along those lines, we talked about Peter McKinnon, Casey Neistat, Gary Vaynerchuk, others, and now you bring up Hormozy and his wife, and these people are trendsetters. Hormozy in the editing style and going and using the bold font and doing the whole thing. So what do you think it is that really sets these trends off? Especially when it's like, what is it about these people that really gets them to go off? I mean, there's got to be a mixture of something here. Is it... I don't know how to ask what the hell I'm trying to ask you.
I know you're asking.
You know what I mean? All this content, all these people putting this stuff out there, and it's like, it's the Hormozy style thing that we land on for a little bit. Like, why is it that? Is it because he's the character? He's got the nose strip, and here's all this like profound stuff coming out of this dude's mouth, and he's jacked, and he looks like the information you hear is counter to what you might perceive him physically to be able to deliver. I think that helps. I think it helps. I mean, I think like the nose strip, the mustache, it helps. But like, if you threw on a clown suit right now and started talking about business stuff, it's not really gonna like help your content. Right. Obviously, it's like it might stop someone in the feed for like a millisecond longer, but it's not that. It's the conciseness of like how they talk about these topics and stuff. A lot of people just aren't good enough. They address their videos with, "Hey guys," and then gone. Yeah. Like that's not. So it's a mixture of, and I think Alex is very good at it. Gary's good at it. I think Alex is a little bit different. And I only consume as like a fan. I don't really know like the inner workings of his team, but I think the way he delivers, like, his opinion about AI or his opinion about, work-life balance or like, selling your car or something, I think it's easy to consume. Most people have like, I don't know what it is, but it's like a fifth grade education or something. And I think his style of content is so easy to digest. And I think a lot of people like, they want to like just add like a million bullet points to like, and it's just so just like full, and it's not easy to like just comprehend. It's like, a lot of videos I watch of like entrepreneurs and, real estate people that like want to build a following. Like I'm like, I'll watch a 2-minute video and it's like, I don't even know what you talked about. I didn't learn anything from it. Like so much of it. And that's the difference between Alex Hormozy and that real estate person that probably won't have a big following, after a year of making content. They're exceptional. Come down to storytelling and the ability to do that in, like you said, a very concise way, but also in an authoritative, demeanor, the delivery of that, the speed of it, of course, as well. So
totally. And it's like practical. I think a lot of stuff Alex talks about is like applicable to like most, like it could be a content creator, it could be you, it could be anyone. Like I think a lot of his content is like helpful in a not niche sense, but he's really good at that. So it's it's contradictory to like what I said about like being niche and like being the mayor of your town, but he's a 1% personality that can like just talk about these topics and tips and stuff that's like just straight to the point. And then he obviously had an editor that broke through and like saw that Mr. Beast style of like keeping you engaged, and now they have like their own style of big bold font that's like been adopted by like everyone now.
Yeah. Do you think that the pendulum swings away from that sort of thing and goes to something that is a lot less chaotic feeling?
Maybe. I'm a huge fan of just like I've made thousands of clips for Gary and all this stuff that's like very like keep the like, consumer engaged. But I'm like, I made this page. It's called a break in your feed, and the idea was just like cool, calm content. Like I don't like a lot of social media videos. It's very like just like taxing and
it's
like
always
annoying
just like coming at you, right?
Yeah, like I don't like even Alex's content too sometimes can be like a little bit too much where I'm just like, no, like I don't want to learn something right now. And that's just who I am. I'm like, and so maybe we do go like take a regress, but I don't know. I think we'll still stay in like, because I think, it is like TikTok and everything, like our attention spans are just like going down. I think it's going to hyper accelerate. But maybe like one day there's just like a relapse where it's like, let's slow it down, more long form content. But I don't think so. I think it's just going to keep going where it's just like 7-second videos with just content.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. It's a little bit wild. It seems like as a community of content creators, we talk ourselves in these circles where we say one thing over here, but then our behavior doesn't really match or map to that. Here's what I mean. Like, even Gary has talked about traditional media not really having its, the teeth anymore. And because somebody like him says it, of course, you get all the other people that just want to be a Gary. They go out there, they shout the same stuff, whether they believe it or not. And so then you get this whole community that perceives traditional media as bad. They're like, well, nobody's on television, nobody's on radio, nobody's doing magazines, nobody reads books. And then what happens when some of these breakout content creators start breaking out? They write books, they get a television show, they got something that's like a podcast that gets syndicated as a radio program. And it's like, so you shit on it over here and then you embrace it when you get over here. So it's not actually bad. Like it just, anyway.
It's like contradictory.
Yeah. And then also like, well, who reads books anymore? But that same person is sitting there like writing blogs, totally. It's still just reading. Like the communication just sort of moves a little bit,
Yeah. But also you might be like an incredible writer and like it might be well worth your time to like write more than shoot video content. Yeah. And that might mean tweets, not books.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And so I'm curious about you being a video creator. Why have you decided to make the kind of content that you make? Because you could be like many of the other people out there doing like tutorial how-tos and all that kind of stuff. But I don't see that coming from you. So why do you avoid that? And why do you do what you do?
I know I'm smiling because I've been told so many times to make that style of content. You should be the guy, doing walkthroughs with Premiere or a day in the life of vlogging with Gary Vee. And
you could sell courses on like processes and all that stuff, right? So
I'm naturally not I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a businessman. I've learned a lot working under Gary and thank God, like I've elevated that side of my career, but I naturally don't want to make a course. I naturally don't want to like sell things. I love art. Like I've over the past 5 years realized like I'm way more of an artist, and I would have never called myself an artist 5 years ago. At best I was a videographer, content creator, but the more and more as time goes on and I lean into the things I like and the people I look up to, like Toro Imoy and all these like Chet Faker, Nick Murphy type artists, I'm like, oh, I love those kind of people that like authentically make something that like they fuck with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been super lucky to work with entrepreneurs and talents to like make these films. And I think that's what I love doing. I've never liked making like music videos or anything, like, you know, and I might go on to do that, but I've always, and I think I've been drawn into this like vlogging sort of world where it's like I have a talent of telling a story by, you know, following around someone for the day.
Yeah.
And so I've been lucky to do that. And that's what I enjoy doing. And
is there a style, something that you wish or would want to do, or you're like, man, I wish I could do that. I don't feel like I can.
Tons of stuff. I mean, I'd love to do like way more like 3D animation and like After Effects and stuff, but I don't have like the patience to like sit there and learn it. And I've been doing more of it. And like, I was lucky to do like an animation project that this past like month where I was like taking animators' work and manipulating it and then being the editor behind the video. And that was fun. And that's like a lot of like learnings, but will I go and like do that? Probably not.
Yeah.
I would know. I think I could explore more things like courses and stuff. I don't think it's naturally me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I forgot your original question.
Me too, because I'm just listening at this point. No, okay, so I got an off the wall question, and you can either answer or not. So, and you might have seen me. I think I prepped this in something on Instagram. But what's something that you heard Gary say all the time, because you're vlogging with him in the same room? What's something that he believes that maybe you don't, or you have an alternative tweet to?
That's a good question.
Because I do a lot. That would drive me nuts after a while. Like if you start hearing somebody saying something that's like super counterintuitive to what you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's a good question because it's easy to agree on a lot of things that Gary says. I thought you were going to go down the route of like, what do you like that he says, and I was gonna bring up something along the lines of like you find what you're looking for. I love that. Yeah, heard him say it a lot, and that
seems too easy though to tee up that question.
That was too easy to tee up. Something that I don't.
And maybe nothing can be an answer, but
no, there's like definitely stuff.
To be honest,
no, that would be the cop out. I do want to find something that like being in the room.
Or maybe it's a style thing or a delivery thing or just like, no, you know what? Yeah. I am the kind of person that needs a process to be perfected before we execute it. Or I don't know.
Yeah. What makes me different than Gary in a way? Like,
or maybe you could just sit on it and think about it if you want to come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to come back to that because it's like, there's definitely, I've had a lot of like, sculpting and I had to change who I was to like work under Gary because it's a very fast and paced thing. I think I'll get back to that because I couldn't actually speak in like a valid thing that I disagree. But
well, let's kind of go off of what you just said. This whole thing really is a conversation. Like I don't have anything prepped. No. So you just said that you changed yourself, obviously because the lifestyle sort of you got to conform to what's going on. And then a lot of people on the outside. You do have some of the people that are like Gary haters or whatever. It's a cult, right? So I'm curious.
Totally.
So when you're in it, how much are you allowed to be yourself? How much is it? And I'm just trying to add clarity to like, what is it actually like? Is it really a cult where it's like everybody's got to conform and 100% and shut the hell up if you don't believe? Or, hey, you could disagree with everything as long as you make a banger edit, I
don't think you can disagree on everything because then I don't think you would end up making good content. Sure. And it's not a cult. I think people feel like that because it's like the team talks about like long work hours and a lot of the same things that Gary talks about. So then like it feels and looks like a cult. I think I'm very different than Gary. Like I love mountains and hiking and all that and dogs and stuff and like. Fucking,
does he not like dogs?
I don't think he likes dogs.
Wow, that's going to be the clip I put out.
Yeah, well, that's a clip we put a clip out, and we should find it, and it got huge backlash. He was like, fuck dogs, I love humans. He's like, it was a very GaryVee thing. Yeah. Where it was like, I love humans more than dogs, and I was like, all right, Gary. But he did get huge backlash.
Well, for Gen Z, I mean,
super,
dogs are people's children now, so you know, it's
totally. Like my dog's my utter joy, and like
right.
couldn't go on without him.
Oh man.
No, I think being part of it, like being part of the team is like you can be who you are, and I think Gary loves the new people. He's like, he always talks about fresh eyes. He's like, what do you see that we don't see? He's like, what's something like that you're, you know, you just joined this, like what's something different we could do? And so he's very interested in like different people. You know, if it was all the same people, you know, the content I think would get stale. And I think like bringing out all these other characters has like allowed it to evolve. And but you do have to like learn that volume is better in his case, because he's trying to test things. Because, you know, GaryVee, the brand, is a lot of it is just like testing for VaynerMedia. You know, a lot of the stuff he's done, he's, you know, relayed to his digital media agency and been like, this is what we got to do. And so you got to be super happy to mold and change and put yourself out of business and all that stuff. So yeah, sure, in a way that it's a cult stream of consciousness, like the same thoughts and patterns. But no, you can be yourself. There's all kinds of types of people, young, you know, there was kids that were 18 on the team. There was a gentleman, Jim Thompson. He was like probably in his 50s. Like,
what was his role?
Jim was the best. He changed the whole like course of the team. He got brought on. He was like higher up, I think, at what's that music? Billboard. He was like a top exec at Billboard. He ends up coming on at Team GaryVee, and then his first like idea was like, he's like, instead of everyone working on all forms of content, Facebook, Instagram, he's like, we need to break into platforms. And that was a huge shift. And so there was like a platform lead, and then there was like an editor associated to it, and maybe like a strategist.
Did you like that change?
In the middle. I liked it because I was like, I'm the YouTube guy. I'm like, I make long form stuff. I don't want to change what I'm doing. Yeah. I like this world. Like, don't fuck with me. And so I was happy to, you know, work on the YouTube stuff.
Cool.
And because like the Instagram stuff was the grind. The YouTube people helped and alley-ooped the Instagram people, but that was the conveyor belt. And I think a lot of that was less creative than making a vlog or weekly V or a film or something. And I didn't want to lose that like privilege of being able to do those things. And so, yeah, the platform thing, I was like, oh shit. But I very well communicated that I didn't want to like step away from YouTube.
Yeah. Where'd the whole thing with Chaz come in, by the way?
I don't
remember like how did I see you use it in something and I asked you about it? I can't recall.
Oh, just on my stories. I probably just posted his song on my story, and
maybe.
I think you responded to it, and I think that was like one of the first conversations that we really had.
Yeah.
My partner, I started dating her in like 2019, and she was a huge Toro fan, and she put me on, and then from that point on, I started like, you know, posting and following his stuff, and I think you had already been following me probably at that point.
Yeah.
And that's when you were like, dude, like I was in that guy's band in like middle school, right?
Yeah.
So crazy. I was like reading the DM. I was like, what?
Yeah. You know how middle schoolers are, dude. Like, it's just wild. You do kind of whatever. You don't really think about like how ridiculous you look. But yeah, we went to like elementary, middle, and I think high school together. And we were in concert band. He played trombone. I'm a percussionist. And we were like, yeah, let's have a band. And it was literally him and I. And because we're in middle school, we can't drive. So of course, what do? We had band practice over the phone, as middle schoolers do.
like through like a landline.
Oh yeah, I mean this is like 1999, 2000.
Oh my god. Yeah. So he's jamming on the trombone. You're beating away on their set.
Yeah. And of course, he can't hear anything. I'm trying to play it. He's got two hands. He's got a slide to move, and I'm over here playing drums.
Like, what? Yeah.
Like that. That's how stupid.
I get it.
Our band didn't last very long, as you might imagine.
It's so funny too, because I was a percussionist. I grew up.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Big drumming family. My grandfather, he invented these drums called the Fibes.
Okay.
Fibes drums.
Yeah.
They were the first fiberglass drums.
That's funny.
A huge company that ended up he ended up selling and stuff. But I always had a set in my house, and I grew up playing drums, and I played percussion in school for like 10 years or something. I don't know. Like,
That's funny.
so it's funny. We got the percussion video alliance.
Yeah, man, it's wild how many people go from music, it seems like, over to something creative like video or something else. Why do you think that is? What's that connection?
They're both creative things. I think I loved drumming and stuff. I think I realized I wasn't like, an incredible drummer. I think it's like it's just such a hard thing to be good at those. Like, it's like the barrier to entry to be like a good musician is fucking insane. I think it's changed a little bit with content and stuff. Like, you might like be able to make great content now as a drummer, and that might change your whole thing. But traditionally, it's, I think, really hard. And so maybe a lot of people step away from that and are still, I don't know, finding mediums to like express their stuff. I think when people make music, they're trying to relay an emotion or something. And I got to do that, I guess, through drumming a little bit, but I've been able to do that way more through video, or, I don't do it, but like painting, and I think that's why, there's like a big pairing between those things.
Yeah. I've always seen such a huge correlation between musicianship or musical components and video components, of just like back when I was playing full time and teaching full time, thinking about that, like I would always say, like, what is it about these world-class musicians that would come through? Like, what in the world is it about Michael Burrett, who teaches at the Eastman School? That's like a world-renowned marimba player. Like, what in the world is it about his performance in a college student that's different? Because the concepts and things are the same, And if you go to a college student and you talk to them about it, it still doesn't get executed the same way. And it's always, what I've landed on is like, it's always the tiniest details that you can't really perceive and see, but it's the addition, or really sort of the culmination of all of those tiny, tiny details that makes a masterful performance. And I feel like it's the same thing in video as well, where it's like, everything is about being subtle, right? It's like the perfect timing on something in a transition, or the perfect thing that with color grading. So it like there's
less is more
feeling there.
Almost.
Yeah, exactly. So like you don't know why, but this feels elevated in the color, in the motion that's going on, the movement, in the scripting, and how it's being delivered, in the movement in the actor's face. Like, all of those kind of things play so well together. And whenever it's masterfully put together, those tiny little tweaks, you're like, that's when you're James Cameron or somebody, right?
I think it's a little bit about like the consistency and repetition thing.
Okay.
Because I think as a drummer, it's like, if you've played that song, 100 times, like you can start adding in more fills or accents or something, because you're very familiar with how like the piece goes on. And I think the same thing with like video. If you've made 100 vlogs, like you can get way more smoother on the transitions, layering in music. And so there is something about like being consistent and like adding your own flair. And it's because you've been there before. You've done it 100 times or so. So I think it's like, like that marimba player at the school, like he's played that thing way more hours than like the college student. Yeah. And they both probably have like a very similar, skill set, but it's like that dude's put like 10,000 hours in. Like he knows what's like coming down the line, and he can add his little flair way better than the college student that's like, just hasn't been there yet. And so, and there's something about music too, as an editor. Like I grew up on my dad's old Mac in GarageBand. Like I just loved like taking like, little stems and like making music. And at a young age, I didn't realize it, but I was learning how to edit, because it's like I was taking these little like blocks, and I was composing these, probably basic songs. But I think that I always think about how that helps me like on a timeline. I'm very familiar with like just pacing and like, and I understood like why I was like relatively good at it. I think it was like years of like just going on GarageBand.
Well, pacing, that's why I don't know if anybody really talks about the importance of music in video editing and giving it like the real credit that it deserves. Because it truly does make the moment. You take the same exact scene and you change what's under that moment in the visual, and you can tell a completely different story. And I find that as well in editing. It's like understanding what it's like in a musician's mind of, okay, we're going to take this thing that's like Elsa's procession to the funeral, classical music stuff, and like, just what does that vibe feel like versus, I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm trying to say, but basically
like a happier song.
Yeah. I mean, there's just something about being in the head of a musician and understanding tone, texture, balance, and blend in performing with the other people on stage. What is your particular role here? Are you the lead? Are you accenting something else? Are you playing something with, I don't know, if you're playing vibraphone, maybe you're playing along with like the clarinets and they have something. And so like just that role playing and understanding that really shows up in video editing as well, where it's like, you know, what's the role of this person? Are they the lead? I don't
totally. And
is there an effect that needs to come out here, you know?
Or an emphasis on text, you know, maybe like, you know, the clarinet text, maybe you want to emphasize that more. And so that, I think a musical understanding can definitely help your editing skills. And so like, for anyone in the, you know, composing or music field, there's definitely an advantage there, because I think you already know like just how to pace stuff. So it definitely it's hard to explain, obviously, but I think there's definitely a correlation between like if you went and did years of musical anything, like that's going to translate super well in like a video world.
I mean, I don't know why this comparison comes to mind, and then we can move on from this, but like you know, if you're watching something visually that's like a heavy scene and the scene ends with a big heavy sigh or something like that, and like just lingering and hanging on it just a split extra second can add even like so much more drama. And the same thing musically. You get to the end of this musical phrase, and instead of like moving on, you just kind of let it sit. It's all the same thing. It's sonic storytelling versus visual storytelling, but the pacing and all those components are the same.
That word sonic's a good pivot point, because there was a point in time where we didn't have like, and he doesn't do as much now, but the sonic branding that Gary had.
Oh,
you remember like the So like, like as a whole though, back to your statement, like music and pacing is such a big thing. It's a little less emphasis, I think, in reels and stuff, where it's just like go, go, go. But in any form of like making a short film or like long form video content, pacing is just like, it's hard to like articulate, but
man, this is why I know I asked you earlier about like content and direction that we're going, and does the pendulum swing back? And I feel like it's always all going to be relevant. There might be moments where as a group we prefer something, but I don't think anything ever goes away. For the same reason, you have good days and you have bad days. You have days where you go on social and like maybe you're stressed. And so social's role at that moment for you is to get away from anything stressful. And you said like Alex Hormozy at times could be weighing down on you, right? Just because the sheer the pacing of it, the education, the content of it is heavy. And if you're stressed, you don't want to be in that mode. So here you are, you're finding something to get you out of stress mode. You need something probably slower, longer, something to escape, right? Then you got other moments where it's like, no, you're in it. Like you're in this brain space where you want to learn, you want something fast. And so you go find it. So I feel like because individually I find that too with like my other media consumption. When I'm feeling stressed at work or something like that, I'll go find a TV show that's funny, you know, just so that you get into the opposite mindset. And so, because we all experience things at different times, and there's never going to be a moment where every human is like moving the same, you know?
Totally. Like, I've made hundreds of clips for Gary, and like, you know, a lot of those days, like I didn't necessarily want to like be listening and to, you know, business content, but that's my job. And then some days, like I do a deep dive on Alex or Gary's content because I you know, maybe I want to fuel that side of me. And so it's like a give or take thing.
Do you still consume Gary's stuff, by the way, now that you're not on the team?
I definitely do. Okay. More so now that I've like I'm not in the States and I'm not around him as much. I think like it makes me feel like I'm keeping up with him, and like it makes me happier like knowing like what he's talking about. But when I was in the States, it was a little bit less because I was just around him and whatnot. And so I've always been like a fan of Gary. I came on as a fan. I'm still a fan. Like I'll always watch his content, but there's definitely times where it's just like, I'm like, all right, like I don't need to, I've heard this one before, and I just move on.
I've made this one before.
I'm like, oh, that's my old clip. Like, no, it's never any disrespect. It's just like, I'm like, I know.
Well, yeah, I asked that question because I feel like I would get exhausted of like, okay, I basically lived with this dude for 5 years. I know everything way more than the public would ever know about him. I could never consume the content as a consumer.
The thing with consuming is one thing. Being around Gary is different. It's a fucking, it'll never get old. It's energy that I can't even, I was thinking about it. I was like thinking about this conversation because I haven't been on a podcast in a while, and I knew the question of like being around Gary, and there's just something different. I was thinking about like being with him. You just don't feel tired on hour 12. Mm-hmm. There's something super invigorating about just his day to day and the way that he conducts a room, and you notice that he's not tired. He's only getting more fueled up at 1 a.m. after a keynote or his third keynote of the day. You're just like, and you're just sitting like, how is this possible? Like anyone else would just be tired, but for some reason, I don't know, being around him in those like 24-hour days, it's I don't know, it makes sense why he's like so successful, because he just packs it all in. Everyone's fueled up around him, happy, doing their thing. It's kind of undescribable. It's biased and fanboy-ish to say, but it's like it's very true.
Like, do you crash, or were you crashing when you got home?
Oh yeah, okay. Definitely. I was dead. Like, I was fueled up around him. I was always on, it's like, you can't miss the clip, the amount of times where he's like, Jace, do you get that? I'm like, yeah, like, thank fucking God I did, could be any second, so, God forbid the camera wasn't running.
Yeah. I got a question. This is a very selfish question, like gear wise, but like, because I told you I find myself in a similar situation filming, like, you go to something, and if it's a 12-hour day, I mean, that could be a billion batteries, right? If the camera's literally running the entire time. So how do you deal with something as silly as that? Is it literally a book bag full of batteries and SD cards and just extras?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't using my Canon when I first joined. I was using like the Team Sony S2, and those batteries run out in like literally like 36 minutes. And we just had like a bag full of them batteries, just making sure. And then, learning the mechanic. Like I remember I'm a Canon guy, and I was using those cameras, and on Canon, you could just rip out the battery and throw it back in without turning the camera off.
Oh, okay.
And the data will save. And I remember the first time I did that with the Sony, and then like I turned it back on, and it like the last clip wasn't there, and I was like, oh no. I was just like devastated. Luckily, it wasn't like anything that important, but that workflow is just a mad amount of batteries. I think the camera's gotten better where like they didn't need as much.
And did you get to like create your own sort of setup, or is it just like, hey, this is what we do?
Yeah, a lot of the people that have joined Team Gary like may have their own setup, they might not. So a lot of them have just adapted the D-Rock setup, which is a Sony S whatever, 2, 3, whatever it's at. Mm-hmm. And then he likes using a Canon lens with an adapter. And so a lot of the setups they've used is a Sony body with a Canon lens. I think they've gone more to just Sony on Sony, because you can use like autofocus and stuff like that. I like my Canon. I had a 1DX when I joined the team. And it was like, I was super comfortable with it. Yeah. And at first I was like, okay, like, let me use their stuff. And then it was very comfortable. I was like, can I use my camera? They're like, sure. Just like, it's your own risk. Like, you're beating up your own stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. And so they were very comfortable with me using that. And that elevated my career, because I could take photos, I could shoot better B-roll. Like, I was way better on my Canon. And so, they're, at the time, very flexible. I think it's got refined where like they have like a few Sony setups. Like, I think it's an S, the new S model, and like a G lens or whatever, 24 to 70.
Yeah.
That's usually the setup.
I'm going to be selfish again, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I'm curious. I'm curious as far as like output that, and I don't mean to make this like a Team Gary thing, but I do want to be selfish, like I said.
We can do both. Like,
if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
As far as output's concerned, like was there a thing of like, we expect X number of videos per week, per day, per event that was filmed? Or was it just like, we want you to make a banger, and if it takes you 4 hours to put the edit together, fine. Or we need you, you get 30 minutes and whatever you could put together, you could put together. I'm just curious. There's kind of like bumpers that you had to play between.
It's evolved. I think when I first joined, it was like, we had to put out at least one post on all like platforms at least. And so like, there was a big responsibility to get that done. And then it evolved all the way to like 4 posts a day. And those posts were already tested.
So you have to make like basically a master edit and then just like resize it, or like cut it down. So now instead of being a minute 30 over here, now it's got to be shorter over here. Or
it's evolved so much. I mean, there was a point in time where, you know, I'd come back with the footage. I'd know a clip existed, and I'd, you know, take that 60 seconds and I'd throw a title on the top, because typically like those videos at the time had that meme style, like, you know, number 1 piece of advice for a small business owner.
Yeah.
But there was a point in time where like, you know, I would make the clip, just send it to Gary on text. He would write the caption, post it himself, practitioner, did it all himself. Then it evolved where we started having a test account. It was called like GVTV. And so we were making the clips, and then they were getting posted on GVTV, and then we could tell if one overperformed or if it didn't, it underperformed. And so then at that stage of the game, it was like, hey, Gary, we have 5 clips that overperformed. Here they are. Which one do you want to post right now? And here's like 4 that just underperformed. And those clips, we would give like another try. We would change the title. We might change the hook on it. And so the team definitely still does it. But there was a point in time where we were taking one clip and running, put 5 different titles on it, and then we'd put like a little bit of money behind it, and then run it as like a Facebook ad. And then you'd know which one did the best. And then we'd be like, this one won. And that was a huge process. That was like tons of clips with multiple variations getting run and paid. And then you know, go through the analytics and be like, this one won. Send it to Gary. It was a huge new process. And
testing on testing on testing. Because you're testing for him and he's testing for Vayner.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're testing for him, and then he's like, this is what worked. And then he's relaying that to the company. So yeah, it's just like a whole mess. But
Wild.
That's one form of how it became. I mean, I think now it's the same process. I don't think they run multiple titles. I think it's more of like, this is the best version that we think is, and then we're going to test it. If it doesn't overperform, we'll try a different one.
Yeah. Okay. So total shift. How in the world did you end up? You brought this up very early in the conversation, but I wanted to come back to it. How'd you end up in, what city are you in?
I technically live it's called Haarlem.
Okay.
It's Haarlem with 2 A's, and it's 20 minutes from Amsterdam.
Okay. So how, you could put any dot on the map and kind of go there. Why'd you go there?
Why did I go there? I wanted to stay I was in New York. I was 3 years in with Gary, or 4 or so. And I sat with him and had a very honest conversation of how I love the remote world. Happy to come in and do my thing. I like the flexibility of being able to work from home, and I don't see myself wanting to go back in the office 24/7. And ultimately, like, the conversation went on, and he's like, what do you actually want to do? And I'm like, I told him, I was like, if I could travel Europe and make content, I'm like, and be with you for that matter, I'm like, I would do that. And he's like, well, we have an office in London. And I was like, I'd love to be there. And he's like, and by then I had bled, done a lot. And I think he realized that, and he gave me the opportunity. He's like, I can get you to London. It's going to take time. It wasn't like done, HR go. It took another year. And in that time, I randomly bumped into this HR lady, and she's like, oh, geez. Like, I used to film with her, like, for like Weekly V and stuff. And she's like, well, I was telling her, I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to go to Europe. Gary's supportive. I'll probably be in London. She's like, oh, that's amazing. Like, we're opening an Amsterdam office. And I was like, oh, I'm like, that's so much better.
Yeah.
And so the next conversation.
Why is it better?
With Gary,
why? What about there versus London?
We know. No, because I wanted to escape New York. I didn't want to be in the 24/7 work hustle. I already had enough context on London. I've never been there, but I know it's closer to that New York City hustle bustle. And my partner had been to Amsterdam. She's like, it's way more fitting to like the lifestyle that we want.
Yeah.
And so then I went narrow in Amsterdam. So it was like Gary, when I first sat with him, he's like, you want to go to Singapore? And I was like, it's too far. He's like, Mexico City. I'm like, no. And he's like, you want to be in Europe? And I was like, yeah, I want to be in Europe. And so I sat with him. Was like, yeah, Amsterdam is, and he knows me. He's like, yeah, that's definitely a way better fit. He's like, that's what we're gonna what's gonna happen here. And cool. So then made it all happen, and it worked out perfect because I work for VaynerMedia on paper, but I do a lot of stuff for VeeFriends.
Got it.
I actually want to cut this out because I don't think it should be public. I don't care. It's live. Like, well,
it's
but
I can all right in the recording.
In a lot of sense, I like the project I'm working on now is for Vayner, but a lot of the stuff I do is for VeeFriends. So it's like there's a lot of like carryover where I'm like just working on like whatever's most important.
Yeah.
Like I think over the last 6 months, I've realized I've become like Gary's like de facto firefighter editor.
Whatever I need you to do, I need you to do that.
Totally. And I really like that for now, because it's like, moving out here was a big opportunity. I'm blessed that Gary sent me out here, and I'm happy to do the most important thing for him instead of like wondering like, how can I provide more value? Like I know I'm doing the most important thing. And so that's been fun.
Yeah.
But no, the Netherlands has been great. Like it's a dope country. Yeah. I don't know if have you been out here before?
I haven't.
Yeah. It's cool. It's people out here have a great work-life balance. I think I love that I still work for a lot of the New York entity. And so I got to like really still grind, but I can, as soon as this is, over, like I can, it's a chill fucking place. Like people are just drinking espresso and wine on the streets 24/7.
That's funny. Get hyped up on espresso and still have balance and not
totally
jittery about everything,
I know. I fucking had one right before this, and I'm like, it is.
Yeah. Every time I see, like I said, I've never been there, but anytime I see video or photos, I'm like, man, that's like stepping back into the old world, like just visually.
Yeah,
it seems.
Yeah, visually, it's a very preserved world. And at first, I was like, like, is it like slow moving out here? And it is, but people are like, VaynerMedia's out here and Ogilvy and like all these huge companies, like they're doing stuff. It feels older and relaxed, but like there's tons of innovation and like NFTs and like everything going on out here. And I was glad to see that, because I never wanted to like take a step back in my career. I wanted to obviously like get a little bit better work-life balance and, create a little bit more happiness for myself. But I didn't want to like, not like, I want to go on to make like amazing films and work with the best people. Like I never want to take away from that. And I feel like out here it's awesome. It's a different playing field. I don't know anyone. I'm meeting people every day. But the opportunity is like out here. Like, and I think it's almost in a way better than New York, because it's like you have all these amazing content creators in New York, and there's a ton out here, but it's like, the big fish in the small pond or whatever.
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
Other way. Right.
Other way.
Small fish in a big pond.
In a big pond. Exactly. So something about being a fish and being good
in ponds. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw on a light real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm not. Yeah. I was like.
Yeah. I guess it's like 6:30 now. We've been going for a little bit. So
this has been awesome, man. I'm really fucking happy to like honestly like have a free form conversation, talk about these things. It's fun. Do you got to run?
Probably in a few minutes. I don't want to, but I have to.
I know. Gotta run the business.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate all your time. I mean, there's a billion things I could ask and know more about you and your journey, the Netherlands. Like, what's next? Where you see your like.
We'll do a round two. We'll do a round two in like 6 months, and we'll pinpoint everything. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be all around the place.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. Well, let's just go ahead and wrap, and we'll just pick it up next time. Is that cool?
That's perfect.
Sweet. Well, and thank you again for taking time to do this. I know it's later in the day and all that kind of stuff. So, and you got stuff going on.
In the day. Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to run over there and press end and probably hang up at the same time if that's cool. But
all good, dude. Thank you for having me, and like it's been awesome, man. And looking forward to seeing some clips and stuff. So
Yeah.
this is dope, man. I probably should have asked you a little bit about your business. I have a little context. Keep going, man. It's like really dope. Like what you got from following all the pages that tag me in these, promos. I'm like, oh shit. And I was looking at some stuff. It's great.
Man, I really embrace that, the idea of just go and like iterating and, sort of making it look pretty as you go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things of like Q1 of this year, I'm really trying to like hammer down on more administrative kind of detail kind of work. We've made some hires so that I can be a little bit more on top, even, be less of a technician, more of a business operator. So,
yeah, because it all started with you and now you've been able to grow the team.
Yeah. So actually there were 2 other founders.
Okay.
And then during COVID, they exited and basically handed me Branded 78, which is the name of the company, which name is stupid, and we knew that at the same time. We were like, name doesn't really mean anything to us.
137 means nothing. Like,
well, right? It's like you build the brand, you build the name. So that we were like, we just gave it a name. 7 and 8 come because the 3 of us had 7 and 8 in our birthdays. Like that's how simple that was,
Yeah.
But like,
I think that stuff doesn't really matter as much. I think it can help a little bit, but it's more of like volume.
Well, sometimes
testing.
people are like, "Oh, you're a branding company." No. So
yeah,
that kind of
but,
thing in there, but it is what it is at this point. But so like it's been me in making strategic hires, and it's kind of nice because now you don't have to run things through filters. You want to do something, you do it. And
you're the boss.
And like I like being fast. If I see that we need to tweak anything, whether it's processes or hires or client work or whatever, it's like you just do it. And so that nimbleness, and we got a team of like 7 of us total now. Most are remote, which is cool.
That's dope.
But
what's the North Star with the company?
North Star is to be able to get me in a place where I can open up other companies, run, Branded 78, use that as a marketing component, the marketing arm for stuff. But I mean, I just want to own other stuff where I'm not just like
a production company or like, is it more like that style of stuff?
Honestly, I don't have an answer for that. I'm so awesome. In the weeds of like continuing to build this part of my world that like,
but it's like the machine to allow to do other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm passionate about other things, education. I've got education degrees and stuff. So like that stuff I'm super passionate about. Somehow getting my hands in helping the homeless population, I think would be really great. I've put all of my brain in this right now, so I haven't like sought out any particular future in those things, and they'll kind of manifest themselves as I can put my brain power into those, but
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I love having the biggest impact that I can. That might sound selfish. It is what it is, but that's just who I am. I want to help. Like if I could help somebody, why in the world wouldn't I? And so
I love that you brought up the homeless thing, because it's like it's one of the biggest differences I've realized. Like moving to Europe, they don't have that problem as bad, and I don't know. It makes me always think about like America, and I'm like, why is that such a fucking issue? Like, is it more people? Not really. Like, so I don't know. It's cool that like that's one of your missions. It's admirable.
Yeah, I mean, I just enjoy helping people, and if I'm in a position to be able to help a lot of people, then I will. So I don't know if that means serving on boards, or I have no idea what that is. But so awesome, I don't know if that's a clear answer, but it's the answer I got.
No, it's dope. I wouldn't have a clear answer either. It's like I don't know. Just day by day, like I know the things that I kind of want to go on to do, but it's like we don't know. Like like
you never know what's going to come. It's
totally, like I never.
I started we have a second podcast here called Fully Unscripted. It's with Cash Daniel, Todd Lanter, and myself. Those guys are former players at Kentucky. Cash was a linebacker. Todd played basketball. And so they sort of like...
Where'd you play?
Audience, audience. Fan. I played fan.
Okay, because I was the fucking... I ran track at best.
I was the band kid, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I was a TA for that. But anyway, so But it's like, you were talking about serendipity and getting you in certain rooms that have propelled what you're doing. Similar things here. I mean, I had Cash on the podcast because he's a local dude. I had Todd on the podcast, local dude. Those relationships been able to leverage together and grow a second podcast, which, I mean, the first guest to that podcast was Kevin Richardson from the Backstreet Boys. Like, sitting on the couch right over here, like,
just out of like relationships.
Yeah. So Kevin is from Estill County, Kentucky, not far from here. His cousin Brian, who's also a Backstreet Boy, went to high school just down the street from here, grew up in Lexington.
So wild.
And because of that connection to UK, Cash played football, which they both love football. So like they knew Cash because he was a linebacker on the team. And so like they were fans of him, which I asked Cash the other day. I was like, what's it like to have a Backstreet Boy as your fan? It's like, that seems so different. But yeah, man, just like relationships and putting yourself in the right places, the right time, going in for the ask and not being afraid to hear no, like all of those kind of themes, like that's been helping propel what I'm doing as well, which is great. And it sounds like you have a similar story.
Yeah, we wouldn't be talking today if it wasn't for like many random relationships that I didn't think were important. And it's like, it's great that we are connected now. And so we don't know what that means in the 15-year thing if we stay in touch, even on a DM level. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I DM'd some kid today that worked at VaynerMedia for like a few months for like Empathy Wines, just to see if like he wanted a gig, because I know he lives in San Fran, and another guy was like, yo, I need a San Fran shooter. And so it's like, you never know. It's like, it's so crazy. So,
yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know.
Well, cool, man.
Put yourself out there.
Well, thank you again so much. I appreciate it.
This has been awesome.
Yeah, we'll do it again in 6 months, and I'll see you in the DMs.
Totally. Well, we'll keep talking, and probably a little bit about Toro. And typically that's been our theme, but no. I think we should definitely tee this up again in like 6 months or something. I think I'll have a lot more data on like living here and the things I'm up to. So
that sounds
it'll
great.
be fun.
Cool.
Yeah, dude.
All right. Thanks, buddy.